This is a video on the Pure Existent, the 9th chapter of the first book of Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine, a summary and explanation. Good morrow. This is a video on the 9th chapter of the first book of Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine. Thank you for liking and subscribing. In the last 8 chapters, we have seen what the role of humanity is in the whole of creation and as part of creation. And that duality presents a stubborn veil, but not an impenetrable one. We have to access the pure reason and intuition if we really want to, as the Vedic seers have already written down before Sri Aurobindo. Now, after a very clear 8th chapter, Sri Aurobindo dives straight into deep waters with a very convoluted and difficult chapter, Existence, the Pure Existent, the first attribute of Satchit Ananda, the highest form of reality we can perceive. Now here, I must say, honestly, that I feel a bit lost. So far, all videos I have made were based on and supplemented by my own spiritual experience. They were not theory or not just theory. I just used theories like spiral dynamics, for example, to make a point and use them as terminology to describe what we have no words for in our day-to-day usage of language. But now the topic is Satchit Ananda, which is the highest aspect of the divine we can experience as human beings. And I don't know squat about it. Because what you need to experience it is an enlightened consciousness a la Eckhart Tolle or Sadhguru or Jet McKenna. I have had many spiritual experiences, but not that of Satchit Ananda. When Sri Aurobindo started writing in 1914, he was already enlightened. Not fully like later, but enough to have direct access to the divine, and he already had encountered Satchit Ananda. Well, I haven't, so I was thinking about skipping the next 4 chapters or abandoning the project completely, but I talked it through with 2 of my friends who are also quite advanced, and we decided that it would be best to continue as best as I can, just summarizing the next few chapters, because the project of summarizing and clarifying the life divine is worth it. And at the same time also admitting clearly that this part for me is theoretical. Unfortunately, these chapters are also very convoluted, and maybe Sri Aurobindo did struggle with putting this amazing experience into words and cross-checking it with pure reason, as he has described in the previous chapter and I in the previous video. Now, what is this existence, this pure existent, that is the underlying root cause of everything? He writes, stability and movement, we must remember, are only our psychological representations of the Absolute, even as are oneness and multitude. The Absolute is beyond stability and movement, and it is beyond unity and multiplicity. Meaning that of course existence cannot be subject to any laws or concepts, including duality, which we know now is our usual default and is a good sign of falsity. Existence just is. It is not a concept or a theory, nor is it a being like some kind of Zeus or Shiva or Odin. Not a super being looking a bit like a large human being. It just is. There is no object, no subject, no time, no it, no verb. Only pure isness, pure objectivity, pure absolute. And there is the joy of being as well, the joy of creation, the dance of Shiva as a metaphor, pure joy of dancing the dance of creation, forever becoming. But this is only a picture for something indescribable, of course. There is no God dancing, but it's a very good metaphor. anything that seems to us relative, dual, temporal, moving, any phenomenon at all, is just our way of looking at something that is too big for us to grasp. And so we describe attributes of it, but never it itself in its wholeness. Like the ancient story of the elephant in the dark room that comes to my mind. One sage after another is sent into a dark room and later is questioned to describe what he encountered. One touched an ear, one touched the trunk of the elephant, one the tail, one a tusk, another a foot, and so on. And all of them described the elephant totally differently, not realizing that they only perceived, describe an aspect of the whole. They infer from what they sensed to a mental subject picture of it, and that this must be the truth. But how can we perceive something that is beyond words, beyond attributes and definitions? Something timeless, spaceless, motionless, infinite, absolute. Or can we perceive it at all? Something without quantity or quality, beyond conditions and appearances. Something which is the basis of all the rest. For sure not by thought, for sure not by senses, and even not by pure reason, for it is beyond thought, beyond mind, beyond senses. Nevertheless, it is possible with intuition and surrender. First in fleeting moments, as we rush by like a river trying to see what is there on the shores. It is a sort of involution as much as an evolution, drawing back inside, but not inside ourselves, but into it. And this will change our life completely, internally and externally, and yet all seems to stay the same, unmovable, stable, but different somehow. This is what everyone who has tried to describe enlightenment has described it at, yet unsuccessfully, because it's indescribable. But if you listen to how Sri Aurobindo and UG and Jed McKenna and so on described it, or Eckhart Tolle and Bernadette Roberts, something changed us completely, and also physically, not only psychologically. And here we can also see how Sri Aurobindo struggles a bit to put the unknowable into words. And in the end, he manages, with the use of poetic means, to be able to walk into the divine existence. We need to withdraw from our egoistic preoccupations, our outward gaze and constant distraction and reaction to external stimuli. Today more than ever, today compared to 50 or 100 years ago, the distraction is 1,000-fold. Sri Aurobindo writes, "For existence, eons are just the dust of a moment. We instinctively act and feel and weave our life thoughts, as if this stupendous world movement were at work around us as a center and for our benefit, for our help or harm, or as if the justification of our egoic cravings, emotions, ideas, standards were its proper business, even as they are our own chief concerns." Meaning we have by default an anthropocentric worldview. We think that, without realizing that we think so, that the world is there for us, which has been made by some religions which teach exactly that the world is made for us. But the contrary is true. We are there for it. We have to become small before it, like a child before its parents. Like in family constellation therapy, we have to bow down before the giant, enormous absolute from whence we came. Sri Aurobindo writes, "When we begin to see, we perceive that it exists for itself, not for us. It has its own gigantic aims, its own complex and boundless idea, and its own vast desire or delight, that it seeks to fulfill its own immense and formidable standards, which look down as if with an indulgent and ironic smile at the pettiness of ours. Meaning surrender, meaning submission. Whatever this pure existence, this absolute, this all and everything is, it has much grander plans than to satisfy our needs and hopes. We are like children to it. And it is like a benevolent and patient grandparent. Yet it is no being in an anthropomorphic sense. We have to become very small to grasp its significance and our insignificance. That will be our starting point. At the same time, we have to be careful not to swing into the other direction so far. Not from megalomania to a minority complex and meaninglessness. We do play a role in the whole of creation, and it is not totally insignificant. That is one of the main messages of the whole book. He writes, there is a sense in which these pretensions of the human mind and ego repose on a truth. But this truth emerges when the mind has learned its ignorance, and the ego has submitted to the all and lost in it its separate self-assertion. To recognize that in our true selves we are one with the total movement. Meaning, we can see that we are one with all. Not more nor less, but one with everything. And we can see it after giving up our claim for dominance. Only because we think we are the boss, the kings, the queens of the world, do we indeed feel this tremendous resistance which we call suffering. We have to stop swimming against the current of the huge cosmic Ganges. And we start to swim against the tide once we go with the current and the flow of the universe. Our inner eyes finally open up. And then we can see, so to say. It's a different kind of seeing, not with the eyes, not with the mind. Because nor can the existent be seen or described in quantities or qualities, as we usually describe everything in. It is not big or small, not one or many, or good or bad, beautiful or ugly, or worth something. It just is, independent of all values, which for our mind is impossible, but it is not limited by our mind. And it is at the same time a force, like a strong wind or river or an ocean tide or cosmic gravity. In India, this force is sometimes called Shakti. The force of existence, the existence of force, this great energy, as we would call it today, energy, brings all phenomena and all matter into being. And while it seems words fall short in describing existence, this force can be described, which is the topic of the next chapter, Conscious Force. Thank you to all my Patreons. Thank you for liking and subscribing and sharing the videos with your friends. And see you soon with the next chapter of the Life Divine, Conscious Force.